Welcome to our channel. Today, we are going to learn about one important episode of the war in Angola, the Battle of Catengue in 1975. At the end of October 1975, with the fall of Lubango and Namib, it became obvious to the FAPLA and their Cuban advisors that the South Africans had intervened in Angola. With Benguela under threat, the decision was made to mobilize two FAPLA battalions and their Cuban instructors, even though these two units had received only a few days' worth of training. One of the two battalions left the training camp at dawn of the 30th of October and marched on Catengue, around 70 kilometers from Benguela, intending to establish a blocking position and prevent any enemy advance. The Cubans never attempted to prevent the enemy from seizing Catengue, but constructed a defensive position behind the town, on the road to Benguela. Although they did not have adequate tools to build fortifications, the mixed FAPLA Cuban unit established a strong defensive position on a ridge just behind a bridge, and carefully camouflaged trenches and fire positions. However, the FAPLA and Cubans did not have enough artillery and anti-tank weapons. They only had 3 75mm anti-tank guns and 3 82mm mortars. On the 2nd of November 1975, the South Africans, after entering Catengue, deployed a company into a reconnaissance along the road to Benguela, which around 0900 hours, arrived in front of the bridge, and prepared for the crossing. Precisely at that point in time, the FAPLA and its Cuban instructors opened fire. Because the South Africans had never previously met this kind of resistance, reinforcements were rushed to the scene and the tide began to turn in favor of the South Africans. The South Africans with his artillery silenced all the FAPLA mortar and anti-tank teams. Then, they launched a series of frontal attacks reaching the trenches on the top of the hill. Although the defensors did launch a few confused counter-attacks, by 1800 hours, the position had been secured. During the battle, the South Africans found the bodies of Cuban instructors lying next to the guns and heavy machine guns they had been operating, as well as documents in Spanish which confirmed high-level Cuban participation in the battle. When the bulk of the Angolan and Cuban forces began to withdraw toward Benguela, the South Africans that had launched a wide flanking move, and arrived at the rear of the enemy position, ambushed them, inflicting further casualties. A large part of the FAPLA force was dispersed, and several Cuban instructors found themselves isolated. The battle had lasted for 9 hours, and the South Africans had suffered at least 10 wounded, while dozens of FAPLA soldiers had been killed. More significant, however, were the first officially recognized Cuban fatalities. 4 were killed, 7 wounded and 13 were missing in action. Although most of them reappeared days later, some are still unaccounted for. The battle at Catengue was the first encounter between the two main forces of intervention in Angola, Cuba and South Africa, and its effect was to throw Luanda into panic. On the 3rd of November, the leader of MPLA, Agostinho Neto, requested immediate and massive reinforcements from Cuba. The Cuban response came within hours. After consulting with his most trusted colleagues, Castro decided to launch a military intervention on an unprecedented scale. From now on, the South Africans had to face not only Cuban advisors but Cuban regular troops. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel to know more about the war in Angola.